dang dangilo, kakyuke, dang dangilo, kesu dang dangi, dan me chintu hingi, lap ke kundang dangi, kakyuke. In Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, if you take refuge until enlightenment, with the practice with generosity and the other perfections, may I attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. We're talking about our lifestyle and the way we maintain ourselves. renounce unethical forms of livelihood and sustain yourself according to the Dharma, we have to maintain ourselves. We have to cover the costs of life, the costs incurred in living, but it's important that our lifestyle, and particularly that which we do for our livelihood, don't go against our deepest principles. It should not generate direct suffering to other people. I say direct because indirectly, in the complex interdependence of the world, to do something that doesn't, to avoid suffering from our action, it's nearly impossible because of the complex interdependence that exists. But there are ways of earning a livelihood which are based on cheating other people, on exploiting other people, and so on. And it goes beyond if our lifestyle or the work that I do or the way we earn our living is legal or illegal. Or generally, one should respect the laws of the place we live in. We live in a country that has its rules which should be respected. But in particular, the more important thing of the rules of a country is the values that we adhere to. It's very important. The lifestyle that we have and that our actions shouldn't be in parallel or different from the spiritual path that we undertake. There should be harmony between the two things. It doesn't necessarily have to be a work is in inverted commas spiritual. Somebody would say, I work in a bank, but I don't like the behavior of banks. Okay, but what you do, you're not stealing from anybody. You're not doing anything which directly generates suffering in the others. You shouldn't have any problem with this. What's important, the decisions that we take and the actions that you have to undertake in your job. For example, something that happens in some professions is that to create a problem in order to sell a solution. This is something that should be avoided. So it's important. I'll leave you all to ponder on this individually, and it doesn't depend on the category, the type of job that we do. It's not because somebody's a doctor. Just because somebody's a doctor doesn't mean that his work is more important, or somebody who does a apparently less important job doesn't mean that it necessarily so. But if you have the luxury to do a job which is in perfect harmony, is consistent with your spiritual path, not all of us are lucky enough to do this. Often in life, one has to do something different in order to cover the cost of living. This is okay. There's nothing wrong with this. In this case, very often we should be not so much to what we do for a living, but how we do our work. For example, I serve in a restaurant, or if I clean houses, if I work in a factory, or if I'm a driver, or whatever job it may be, very often the part that we need to give attention to is the way in which we interact with others, the way we carry out our tasks. This is, I believe, very important because the way in which we do this, that determines if we manage to utilize the opportunity that we have into work also as a part of the spiritual path. Because if in work I have situations in which I have to confront other people, to have to be with other people in their difficult moments of tension, etc. And I use this as a moment, use these moments to practice kindness, patience, etc. That's fine. Atisha himself said when he came from India to Tibet, he brought with him a few people with him, which included his cook. His cook seemed apparently wasn't a very easy person. So some of his disciples, they went to Atisha and they said, "Oh, great master, you know that person," the name of the cook I can't remember. "You know that person well. It's not that you could. He's been working so much. You could maybe think about maybe he should have a holiday. What do you think?" Remembering that to go to India, from India, it was 6 months to get there and 6 months to come back. A year to stay there. And Atisha said nothing, as if he hadn't understood. And they said, okay, maybe he could do a retreat. How about that? 1 or 2, 2 or 3 years, 12 years. And Atisha said, hang on a second, who are you talking about? You're not talking about my teacher of patience, are you, by any chance? And then, of course, they had nothing to say. And that's the end of the story. Therefore, Atisha was very clear about the person for him who tested him every day. He was a difficult person, many difficult characteristics with whom it wasn't easy to be with, and he used that as an opportunity to practice patience. It was told that the practitioners who followed Atisha, the Kadampa tradition, had an attitude which is, I find, very noble, definitely not easy to apply. Let's take, for example, patience. If a person at a certain point is in a context in which there's nothing makes him lose his patience, let's say there's nothing which tests his patience, we're okay, we're fine. So we're about patient, we don't lose our temper. But they went to look for more difficult situations in which their patience was tested, to see really if they had real patience. Or somewhere hidden there were the vestiges of anger. The better they overcame difficulties, the more they would try and find more difficult situations to dig out the hidden mental defilements. The most of us, I would say, there's a moment in which there is calm and there aren't any great objects of anger. I'd say you don't have to do this. You can enjoy that moment. What I want to say, though, is it's important to have a life which is correct, which is a right means of livelihood, which doesn't cause direct suffering to others. This is very important, with a base of which is not based principally on causing harm to others, to animals, nature, people. And the important thing is to every one of us within our own life, style of life, the work context, we should try to have a life not only how we work, but to also be aware in the way we consume, not only the way we work. It's not just working and obtaining the resources, material resources, that is consistent with Dharma, but also how we use these resources and material means should be consistent with Dharma. Because in this society in which we live, there's a level of interdependence which is very different from that which existed in the 1100s. In 11th century, sorry. I buy a product. I'm in inverted commas. Okay, when I'm almost as if I was a shareholder in that company. I'm part of that company because with my energy I invest in that company. So in inverted commas, I'm like a shareholder. It's a bit extreme what I'm saying, but it means we should be careful. I don't want to set down rigid rules, but we should be aware and be careful the type of products we use, because we are part of this complex interdependence. But if I don't buy this product anymore, what will it change? I'm nobody. Because it's, on one hand, it's insignificant if one person changes, but nothing exists independently from the others. Therefore, I would add in this phrase not only to renounce unethical forms of livelihood, but also avoid unethical forms of consumption. So we have to be careful how we generate our material means, but also the consumption of these means, because our interaction with the world brings many results. Therefore, the most important thing is to interact with the world, material world, in an aware way, remembering that our choices have an impact on the rest. Therefore, we have to be careful to do that which we consider to be consistent with our values, principles, etc. I think that's pretty clear now. And sustain yourself according to the Dharma. Here there are some rules which transmitted. Mainly, don't do a job that is based on the inducing suffering in others or to exploiting weakness of others. But try to, in the work that each one does, to interact in a productive way, to bring something positive, to interact the best of your capacities to be positive. There are people who do jobs which are you think they're kind of insignificant, but what happens is, even if I do a job which doesn't seem to be very significant, how can I transform it? Not in what I do, but how I do it. Okay? And there's a third passage step. It's not what I do, how I do it. And the third step is the way in which I do it, what qualities and inner aspects am I cultivating. If I spend a day at work and gradually I manage to develop more patience or more kindness, more politeness, I see that the way I interact is improving. That's great. Maybe I have a period of work. Material is very good, but it's more stressed, anxious, aggressive, etc. So I've got a bit more money on my bank account, but then I might have to pay more in medicine and medical treatments. At the end of the day, economically, you might not seem so advantageous to have a well-paid job. So think not what you do, how you do it, and in what way am I transforming myself? Remembering that the limits and to respect our weaknesses, our own limits. For example, if a situation, I can't live it in a positive way for me, at a certain point, if I have the possibility, I should distance myself, change, to do things in a different way. Let's go on. This is really hard. Forsake material possessions and adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. The Aryas in Tibetan Pakpa means the beings, the supreme beings, superior beings, and it doesn't mean a race or the Aryan race, for example, because it has been used, that word, to indicate a superior race. The Aryas are all those who have managed to develop a direct experience with a correct view of reality, and they have eliminated their own ignorance and live in harmony with themselves and others. These are the Aryas. In this case, forsake material possessions and adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. Let's see what are the riches of the Aryas, which we'll find in the next verse, verse 26 of the same text, which talks about the riches of the Aryas. The jewel of faith, the jewel of faith, the jewel of discipline, of morality, the jewel of giving, the jewel of learning or listening, the jewel of dignity, the jewel of self-control, and the jewel of wisdom. These are the 7 riches, these most sacred forms of wealth. So what should we adorn ourselves with? What should we accumulate in life? Not material wealth. Material things have their function and should be used within their functions. They're here to serve us. As we live in a material world, naturally, we need to interact with material objects. There's nothing wicked in having material goods, but the scope of our life shouldn't be to accumulate the material goods, but rather to accumulate inner riches. This is our main objective. Therefore, rather than see how much we earned at the end of the month, at the end, oh, what great business I did, at the end of it, that's okay as well, but it becomes very important to see if we have been developed our faith, or rather the direction in which we're moving, the faith in the path, faith in Buddha, faith in ourselves. Therefore, to have faith means to have clarity on what I'm doing, where I'm going, and what I want. That means to have faith. Having no faith means being a bit lost in life. Not have an objective or clarity, not knowing what we want. Faith for me is principally this. A person who has a lot of faith is certain of what he or she is doing and where he or she wants to go. Cultivate faith. Cultivate morality. Here it's called discipline. Really, the right word is morality rather than discipline. Discipline is important, but more important is morality. Morality is our capacity to cultivate that which it benefits us, not to abandon that which harms us. It's our capacity to maintain the commitments we make. We have the jewel of giving, generosity, to give materially, love, materially, help, protection, and to give Dharma. To be able to share with us that which we have is very important. It's part of inner richness. The jewel of learning in Tibetan, Tepeno. We can also say that's the jewel of listening, is our knowledge and the vision of the world that gradually is developed. Therefore, I become richer in listening when I have I have a more open vision of the world. I'm open to when I gain more knowledge and transform my vision of the world. The jewel of dignity and the jewel of self-control. The translation of the two words is sometimes translated differently. How can I explain? Practically, it's the capacity to recognize that which harms us regarding our own behavior, and to have that's translated as dignity, to avoid that which harms me. I have my own dignity because I want to avoid that which harms me. It's an aspect in which what the others say, what they see, I know what should be avoided and what should be done, and I follow this path because for respect to myself. It's consideration for myself. In other words, it's also translated as consideration for oneself and for others. The jewel of self-control. In the first case, it's consideration for oneself. I do this because I realize this behavior is harmful or good for me, and the next one is I avoid that action because I'm ashamed in front of the others. I have consideration for others, therefore, both because I don't want to bring harm to the others and I don't want to be a bad example, and I have a bit of self-control, and I know I shouldn't do it. When there's a behavior which I know should be avoided, there's a difference between if we're alone or if we're with others, no? Our capacity to avoid bad behavior when we're alone it's the consideration for ourselves. When we commit erroneous behavior in the company of others, it's consideration for others. Sometimes we'll say, Lama, oh, in front of you everybody's fine. Well, and I say, well, at least they're good in front of me. Huh? At least they behave well in front of me. You know, just a little bit of and I want you to know they don't always behave like that. Well, okay, but in front of your master, a minimum of self-control. Okay, then maybe when they're not in front of somebody they respect, they let themselves go and do whatever they want. But at least in front of the master, this is something. This capacity to control ourselves and direct our behavior. And the jewel of wisdom and of discernment, to have a vision which is consistent with reality. In other words, that which Atisha says is, don't be attached to material riches. Don't dedicate your own life to accumulating material wealth, but rather to inner wealth. There's a text I read once in Tibetan which says something like, during life, you work so much to accumulate material wealth. You do so many negative actions to accumulate this wealth. You have conflict with other people, you get angry, you do bad things, and you accumulate so much negative karma in accumulating this material wealth. Then you die, but before you die, you should decide what to do with your wealth, who to give it to, etc., your material wealth. You die. Those who inherit what you leave behind have no respect for you. They argue between themselves, and you, in the meantime, have accumulated negative karma. It's a bit of a dramatic point of view, but if you think about it, when we die, the material wealth we can't take with us. Somebody asked me once, really seriously, this is not a joke, he asked me. He came to me and said, look, I'm thinking, I've been so successful. I've made lots and lots of money. But, boy, you Tibetan Buddhists, you have this thing of reincarnation. I said, yes. How does it happen? And I explained to him a little bit how it happens. And he said, well, if I make a trust, I put like 100 million, whatever, in it, and leave it in the hands of somebody who must find my reincarnation. And then he gives to my reincarnation the money. I said, well, first of all, I wouldn't trust the person. It would be a great business. Can you imagine if transferring people's money from one life to the next, the 10% and then the management charges, it would work really well as a business. I'm sure somebody would take it as a job. And you never know, it might work. But it really is a con. I would never believe such a thing or trust anybody to this. With the day in which we die, we cannot take our wealth with us, material wealth. But what we have accumulated within us, we take it with us. It's not worth to accumulate rancor, hate, tension, conflict for something that will lose. Therefore, Atisha said, forsake material position, which it doesn't mean you take a vow of poverty, but don't make it a priority to accumulate material wealth. That shouldn't be our priority. The material wealth exists in order to be used within our needs, with this lifestyle we have. But we should be aware not to become slaves of material wealth, not to live for them, for material things. But rather we should adorn ourselves, not with jewels, the metaphors, the jewel of faith, etc. It's like putting diamonds, gold, and beautiful jewelry on, or lovely cars. One should adorn oneself, but with patience, joy, satisfaction, love, knowledge, awareness, and so on. Therefore, with awareness, cultivate internal qualities. Abandon attachment to material things. Don't live for them, and adorn yourself with internal qualities. And the second part is even more difficult. Leave behind all busyness and distraction, every frivolity, and remain in a place of solitude. Solitude doesn't mean to be alone. It means away from distractions. One of the main points in our life is that if we look, one of the biggest businesses in the world, what is the turnover? What are the biggest companies' turnover? Okay, there's energy, food, arms, medicine, entertainment, and sex. Or maybe sex before entertainment, I don't know. I remember once, years ago, I saw in some magazine there was analysis of the annual turnover of all the the whole world of pornography compared with the turnover of the big tech companies, Microsoft, all those companies. And it was absolutely shocking, really shocking. But beyond all this, one of the biggest turnovers is entertainment. I like relaxing to see film. I've got nothing against it. But what happens is that very often it takes a big chunk of our life and we distract ourselves with entertainment to abandon distractions. Why? Because we have a life objective where to put our energy. When you don't know where to put your own energy and doesn't know what to do at that point, okay, just pass time. But on the other hand, if I have an objective to train my mind because I want to utilize this life to attain a state of peace, to help others to do the same thing, I have to use this life in that direction. And there are moments in which we say, okay, oh, I have many thoughts, let me relax. Let me do something that relaxes me. That's okay, that's fine. We're not talking about we have to have a rigid ascetic life. Some people I've seen who enjoy themselves the most. Well, my master, Lama Michel, was so joyous. He had no problem enjoying himself and relaxing. When I remember in the monastery there was 1 week a year, 2 in fact, in the middle of the year and at New Year's when everybody had a holiday. What happened was all the vows, personal, the basic vows, everything, the rules of the monastery were suspended during that for a week, twice a year, and there was absolute chaos. There were people put speakers, and they put speakers outside the windows, and they played poker all day and all night. I used to run away in those periods, but it was really chaotic. But there was something in particular. You saw people really having a good time. And then towards the 5th day, and then they couldn't stand it anymore. It was just too much. When it was time to reassume the rules, they were all happy. But anyway, I've seen people who my masters enjoying themselves a lot. It's not like the most of all people I knew. I never saw one of them live with an attitude of heaviness. When we say to abandon frivolity and distractions, entertainment, it doesn't mean having an austere, closed life. It means having joy in what we do, to direct ourselves with joy in the actions which we undertake, but trying at the same time to diminish the distractions. In this case, one of the distractions that we have today is internet, obviously, which is something not indifferent. I invite you to try have a day during the week without using the cell phone, or better still, using nothing with internet. I don't know if it's that difficult. If you have to do something for work, okay, do it. But for the rest, just break off. Just maybe to read a book, to reflect, to walk, to talk, to listen. Because we live in an epoch where there's so much distraction. For heaven's sake, in the 11th century, they were talking about distractions. What were the distractions in the 11th century? Of course there were, otherwise Atisha wouldn't have written about them. But what were they? If Atisha came here now with us. Maybe would have put this verse first, not in this position. Remain in solitude means away from distractions. And it's the same word that's used for this place, Gompa. Gompa means a place away from distractions. Therefore, we must try to create the conditions in our life, also external ones, for concentration, for study, for a lifestyle which is consistent with our principles, to have a more peaceful and balanced state of mind. And to have such an inner stability, so even if we're in a condition where it's contrary to how we'd like it to be, we manage to maintain our balance. Because otherwise it's where when you're alone you're fine, and as soon as there's a bit of noise you lose your balance. It's important to remember that what I see, what I hear, etc., has a big influence on us. Therefore, to eliminate every distraction, every frivolity that don't bring us any benefit in particular, and remain and live free from these distractions, because distractions generate pleasure. From the point of view, physical point of view, that every time we see something new, we feel the dopamine in our body, we get this sense of pleasure. And we create a dependence to new things, to novelty. And what we see today, what are even the names that are given? What's the name given to information, new information? It's called news. And often our interest is not what's happening in the world, what can I do, how can I interact, but rather just to have new things, novelties. So the way we interact with social media, to send messages, to receive messages, to try to find finds in websites, very often it's not because we're interested in that thing particularly, but rather there is a dependence, a physical dependence, chemical even dependence to things which are new. And we have to be very careful with this. Therefore, diminish as much as possible distractions, because let's remember, if there's no space, there can't be, how can I say, something can't grow where there's no space. Space is the lack of abstraction. So in order for there to be clarity in the mind, there needs to be space, because so if there is a right judgment, discernment, awareness, we need space. To have space, we need to fill our mind with obsessive thoughts, with so many objects of distraction, etc. It's one of the processes which is important to diminish objects of distraction. And the next verse is related to this. Refrain from idle gossip and always guard your speech. Refrain from idle gossip and always guard your speech. We have the habit of talking. We have the habit of having to manifesting verbally our thoughts and sensations. Sometimes I found myself in a few people, there's something which needed to be discussed once. There was a conclusion. No, that's not enough. Everybody Everybody has to give their point of view. I said, well, why? We've already concluded. Why? But I have to say what I think. Okay, go ahead if you insist. Not because saying what I think brings a benefit, no. Because for my own necessity to manifest myself. This is really strong in our culture. Very different from the Tibetan culture. When I talk about Tibetan culture, I'm talking about the monastic culture, which is different from the lay Tibetan culture. But I remember once I went to my master at the end of the day, and I started talking and then giving him a briefing of the day, and this and that happened, this, that, and the other. And he looked at me, he said, doing his mantras. He never responded. Once he said, you Westerners really have to speak, don't you? And slowly, I learnt to speak less and less. And there were periods of silence created. And I saw the beauty of being together in silence, much more intimate to be in silence with somebody rather than talking the whole time. It's really nice. The point is here, don't say that which isn't necessary. When we say think before you speak, when we speak, it's a communication where there should be a dialogue between two people in which I say something because I want you to understand something. When we ask myself, but why do I want to say? Do I want to transmit something to that person, or do I want, because I feel the necessity to say something? This is something I learnt coming into Italy. At some point then, there was the need to talk because the person wanted to talk, not because they had something to say. Therefore, in certain cases it's okay, but so used to elaborating our ideas while we talk, but we should be careful in which we do it and where we do it, because when we verbalize a thought, we reinforce it. And maybe we have made our process, we found our own clarity, but we leave seeds in the mind of others, and we influence other people whether we like it or not. Therefore, diminish these, speak less is a great thing. Not saying that which is necessary is a defect. It's important to talk, to communicate where there is a need. But we've already said before, when we talked about the 10 negative actions, to stop talking in vain, have no sense, useless conversation. And also to control what we say which is necessary. To be aware of what we're saying and to control our speech. I think that's clear now. Let's remember that today, when we say speech, it includes text messages. That's part of speech as well. Otherwise, when I've seen a few times, the people who've had a silent retreat, they take the commitment of not speaking, but they went round with a block. They went around with a notebook, and when there were people talking about amongst them, they really had this urge to participate, so they used to write down messages. They would write messages to communicate. So rather not speaking, it's best to be quiet. Just say what's necessary, be it in a message or speech. But in other cases, it's important to speak, for example, where there's a need to communicate. Let's remember to use speech to communicate. If one of us has has a need to communicate, to elaborate thoughts and sensations. If there's a friend, but it might happen. It might happen that I need to seek help in elaborating your ideas and thought and sensation, but we need to keep guard of this. When you see your masters and preceptors, preceptors are those, is in the monastic context, the abbots, the masters of discipline, the people who took vows before us. In our case here, when we meet, cultivate the wish to serve them with respect. There's a fundamental point here, the importance of gratitude. Because when I feel gratitude, it means I have received a lot and I feel rich inside. And it's a very powerful sensation, a sentiment that's important for us. When we have gratitude, it brings satisfaction. Where there's no gratitude, it brings the opposite. It brings dissatisfaction. Therefore, it's really important for us to recognize that which we have. And for this reason, it's very important to have respect. I always remember when I speak about this, that as from a very early age, I had a very natural, spontaneous reaction of respect, external respect. Sometimes they used to make fun of me because in the house where I lived, the house of Lama Ganchen, there was one of the very few telephones in the whole monastery. Yeah, and every now and again people used to come and take a phone call, and I was there, and Lama Ganchen used to call, and there were other people there, amongst the Galapere, other friends, and I could not speak, wasn't able to speak to Lama Ganchen sitting down, relaxed. I couldn't do it. I used to stand up and I bowed in front of the telephone. And they used to make fun of me. Hey, he's on the other side of the world, he's not in front of you. But I just couldn't do it. And I had a strong natural sense of formality. Once I came to Italy, I was with Rinpoche. One of the things that I found impossible to sit at the same level as him. I go to his bedroom in Milan. He had a very small bedroom in the attic of this building. You could only stand up in the middle of the room. There was a futon on the altar, and always jam-packed full of people. And one day, I go there to say hello to him. There was no place to sit down, so I was in the corridor outside. He said, "No, you come here. You sit here with me on the bed." "No, Rinpoche, no, I can't. Better not." He looked at me. He said, "Okay." And he looked at me severely. He said, "You just come here and sit here." But from his expression, I understood I had to do it. What is better? Respect respect his wishes, or respect what I think should have happened. But in that situation, I sat on the same level as him on his bed. At first, I was so uncomfortable. I was sitting in the corner. I didn't feel at ease at all. It was really unpleasant. And then a few days, in another situation, and there was no room, and I sat on the bed, but this time with a bit more confidence, not in the corner. And there was, but there wasn't, the third time there was room, but I found myself, I automatically sat on the bed. And what I observed, that the real problem for me wasn't the fact that at a certain point I acquired the habit to sit on the same level as him, because that you can change quite easily, is that not maintaining a certain type of respect, external respect, that created an internal of taking things for granted, of not having awareness of the presence. And I went to Rinpoche and I said, I know for you it's not important that I have a more respectful attitude towards you, but to me it is, and I want to do it. Because we need to cultivate this respect. What does that mean? That when I stand up when somebody comes in, I'm aware of his presence. I'm not indifferent to the fact that he or she is there. I give importance to that presence. There's a text that's called the 50 Verses of Devotion to the Guru, very an old text from India, which I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who doesn't have a strong stability in the practice, not for those who are wavering. Even in the monasteries in Tibet, they teach it only after many years of being a monk. There are a lot of advice on how to behave with the Guru. But the fact is, when we give respect to someone and give value, we give value to what we receive. And it's not only a question of respect to the gurus, but also to teachers, doctors, all those who give us something. It's respect towards the other, which is really important, which in part I believe we have lost. The times I've been to universities in the West, I've remained absolutely shocked by the lack of respect that I perceive of the students have towards the teachers. In India, the monastery was the other extreme. We all entered looking down. We all left the room without turning our back to the teacher. Total silence, etc. Not because it was imposed, because it was part of we did it with joy. It was natural for us to behave that way. So when Atisha says, when you see your masters, cultivate the wish to serve them with respect. That means cultivate an attitude of gratitude and the joy of being in their presence, of being able to offer them something, to be able to do something for them. And let's remember that the best offer that we can make to our masters is to put into practice what they teach. This is the best, absolutely the best offer you can make to your masters. At the same time, he continues saying, with those possessing eyes of Dharma, that means those who have knowledge of Dharma, and those first setting out upon the path, they are both to be regarded as your teachers. In other words, treat everybody with respect. If you're in front of your masters, generate a sense of respect and gratitude when you're in front of somebody who are not our teachers but have a deeper experience. We treat them as if they were teachers. And also people who are just starting on the path, who we don't see have more knowledge or experience than us. In other words, the importance of reacting and relating to each and every person with humility and respect. Remembering that in reality, we never know who exactly we have in front of us. Therefore, if I treat the other with respect, I've got nothing to lose. But the person does this and the other, does this and the other, that's a problem of the other, not my problem. From my part, I treat you with respect. Then, as you treat me, as how you behave, it's your business, not mine. Something that regards you, not me. Therefore, try always to relate to each and everyone, remembering that we can learn from every single person. If we are open to this, there is always something to learn from the other. But which we often do is we present ourselves with a great judgment and we create distance with the person in front of us, and we can forget all about learning something from that person. Rather, it's important to be open and to learn from everybody, not to create these blocks, distances. Let me just repeat once again the importance. It's important to judge the behavior and not the person. I don't know if that's clear. Is it clear? Come on, is it clear? Yes or no? That's really important. Otherwise, this person is così. This is like that. Why? Maybe he behaved once or twice like that, but he or she had other types of behavior. When we manage to make a distinction, this helps us, really helps us to be at peace with other people and not to be too much in conflict. When you encounter other beings, look at them as your parents or as your children. Going into detail, whomever you meet, as if he was your sister or brother or friend, your child. In other words, try to have respect and to be close to the other, and also affection, because certain behavior, when it's from a person who's near to us, even if we don't agree with the behavior, we still maintain a level of affection. Does it happen with a son or daughter that he or she behaves in a way that we don't agree with? Does it happen that a son or daughter never behaves in a way which we find inopportune? Well, everybody, anyone who's close to us, in a way with which we don't agree with. But has it ever happened we've wrongly judged somebody who we're fond of, but their tendency is we tend to see behavior, not the person, with people close to us. Therefore, we should do it towards everybody. To try to have closeness, not try to have distance between us. And it's important to allow ourselves to see the other and not to relate to the other, always thinking of our own needs, constantly thinking of our own needs, which unfortunately is what tends to happen mostly. I go somewhere there's a person for a service, I go to a restaurant, I go wherever it might be, and there's a person who carries out a service. We shouldn't see the service. We should remember that there's a person behind that service. Good morning. You exist. Is that clear? Do not befriend those who act in harmful ways and rely instead on true spiritual friends. When we're easily influenced, are we easily or not influenced at all by people? I believe very much. We're really easily influenced by other people with whom we interact in our daily life, the people with who we are with in our daily life influence us, the way we think, the way we react, their attractions, our aversions. What's the definition of of a friendship that leads us astray. It's a friendship where we have an attraction, but the interaction with these people takes us away from our spiritual path. They lead us astray. They makes us cultivate our bad habits, and they don't help us to be a better person. These are called friends who lead us astray. They can be nice friends, pleasant people, but they don't do us much good. What's said here is that the people with whom we interact on a daily basis, either virtually or directly, have an influence on us. Because things that we read in internet, I don't know how much we read on paper. What's the level of influence that it has on us? Very high level. Therefore, where we see that something influences us to have more anger, envy, dissatisfaction, conflict, etc., a distance is created. And we should try to be nearer people who give us something nice, with whom we have qualities that we esteem, that help us to grow. When it says here, but rely instead on true spiritual friends. There's a double meaning here. This in Tibetan, Shenya means also a friend, but also means somebody with whom there's a deep affection, which is also a friend. Word friend in Italian, amico. Amico in Sanskrit is very similar. Mitra, which comes from Maitri. And Maitri, means amico or friend, someone I love. So, because you're my friend, because I love you. That's the etymology of the word, at least in Italian. That means friendship. When your happiness is important to me. So the virtuous friend, somebody we love, with whom we have a virtuous relationship, who helps us to develop, which is one of the what's used for the guru, the spiritual friends. Two meanings here. One is to find the spiritual company in our spiritual path with our masters and other people who follow this path. And the other meaning is to try to be near to those who have the qualities that we want to develop, to be near people who positively influence us. When we find ourselves with other people and we see that we have a good capacity to influence them positively, fine. But if they lead us astray and we're not able to have a good influence, it's better to keep a bit of distance. But they influence us negatively and vice versa. Even if it may be pleasant, because it's often pleasant. And this is something which I look at the teachings of Lama, the gradual path to enlightenment. There's so much emphasis put on this, on the influence of friendships that we have. Even there's a vow which says, don't sleep for more than 7 nights in the house of somebody who has a totally different vision from you. Which refers to the fact that if you're a long time, in this specific case, it's not just a different vision, it refers to aspect of a tradition, a world vision which is opposed to yours. When you're for a long time in this context, gradually you're easily influenced. so it can disturb your stability. Once we've found our path, we need to keep on it. Here there's a which I believe is very important, and I want to share. It's very important to be influenced by positive people, but it's also very important to enter contact with different visions and different ways of seeing the world. We shouldn't be afraid to have encounters with different visions of the world. We should avoid the conflict of these visions, but not the encounter of these. Because what happens is when with all people the same as us, people who think in the same way, we have the same versions, attractions, and if our vision of the world is great, then helps us to maintain it. What happens is that we often have a much more closed, obtuse view of the world because we don't have encounters with people who have different visions of the world. Even from the point of view digitally, what happens now with social media, etc., is that you increasingly get in touch with people who have a similar vision to you. And that can make you think that that's the whole universe and the other is wrong. And it helps to create polarization, therefore. It's very important to be open to people who think differently, to listen, try to understand. Because when we have a dialogue, not two monologues put together, which is what tends to happen. We don't have dialogue, we have two monologues. In dialogue, there's the person who talks and the other listens, and vice versa. And when you're listening, there needs to be openness. When there's dialogue, there are two possibilities. Either we open our change of seeing things, or it reinforces the way we see things. If I'm going to start a dialogue who thinks in a different way from me, and at the end I see my way of thinking is clear and valid, that's great. So I reinforce that way of thinking. But if I see there's something that I wasn't in agreement with, I learn more from the other, even better. So at the same time, we should look for the virtuous company, people we feel good with. We should absolutely not have any fear to be with different people, because encounter with that which is different makes us grow. Therefore, when we're in ever context, people think differently, that's great. But the important thing is that we are open to the other. Let's go a little bit more ahead. Abandon any feelings of hostility or ill will, and always be joyful. Sorry, there's a mistake here. And always be joyful. We need to have a literal translation. Abandon aversion, hostility, and sadness, not ill will. Literally the non-happiness, abandon unhappiness and hostility. And anywhere I go, with whomever I may be, allow yourself to be joyful. And here there's something which is very important. To allow yourself to be happy. It's a bit of a contradiction. It says we want everybody to be happy. And then how come we don't allow ourselves to be happy? But very often what happens is that we don't allow ourselves to be happy. How can I be happy given what's going on? How can I be happy when, look at the situation I'm living in. We condition ourselves, we condition our inner state of being by our perception of what we see around us, and we feel joy, and then we feel guilty given what's going on or the situation. I find myself in the state of joy, of happiness. Above all, is nothing negative. First of all, it's wonderful, which should be cultivated, and depends prevalently on the way in which we live life, not on what goes on around us. Therefore, wherever you go, be happy. Allow yourself to be happy, to be well, to be happy. There are things that are not good, okay. Things that are okay, that's good. But if we get used to be grateful, to rejoice, to find a source of happiness which is not external, because there are two sources of happiness. This is here I'm referring to there's a specific teachings which talks about love and compassion, and it says there are two kinds of compassion. One is the compassion sincere, which is born from when we find ourselves in a situation external situation, and the person is suffering, maybe somebody connected to us, and we want to help that person not to suffer. We, with in front of a situation like this compassion arises, strong sense of wanting to help, and the other is to feel compassion inside and outside, to induce ourselves to have a sense of compassion without it having to be conditioned by an extreme external condition. It's the same thing with joy. It's one thing is to feel joy, to be happy in front of a pleasant situation, the fact that things are going well, then when I've managed to get an object of desire or anything of that kind. But the other thing is to feel joy, spontaneous joy, to have in a state in which joy comes from inside, and someone is just simply joyous. There are problems, yes, okay, they're confronted, they're not ignored, but everything is lived with joy. I know this seems like in many traditions it's spoken about. This joy comes from an inner state of joy, of balance, of love. It comes from. This brings us joy. One of the keys of this verse is allow yourself to be happy. We often say it's too good to be true. Why? Why can't we just be well? What's wrong with it? There has to be something that's not right. It's interesting because in our culture we're used to asking, how are you? In Tibetan culture, in the monastery, you never ask how the other person is, never, ever. We say, how are you? As a way of saying hello. In the monastery in India, you ask, where are you going? Not, how are you? In the beginning, I didn't understand that. We were going to the debating session with a cushion in our arms, and then everybody asked, well, where are you going? Well, where do you think I'm going? But they didn't even want to know the answer. It's a way of saying hello. Then I've often found myself saying, how are you? Yes, everything good. And then a few minutes later, I'd say, well, really, how are you? If you don't want to know, why ask? Because if you really want to know how I am, often the replies are not, if you really want to know how somebody is, it's a bit risky because there could be a whole list of complaints. So it's kind of easier to say, is everything going badly? That would be easier. Or let's try and rejoice in something. Otherwise, we have this habit to ask how you are, to ask this continually need to see how we are. And what happens is this continual monitoring of how we are is projected on the external world. And it seems as if we can't really be well. Because look what this one's doing. I mean, look at this and look at that that's going on. How can I be happy? Instead, at least we can desire to be happy regardless of what's going out outside, to rejoice, to be in harmony with yourself and others. Then there are difficulties which are confronted, of course. But starting from this principle, allow yourself to be happy. Why is it so difficult? Because we have conflicts. We have dynamics which are part of us. And we continually project them on the outside world. But to allow ourselves to be happy, which implies to allowing yourself to be well, implies to stop victimizing yourself with regards to the outside world, but to view your own dynamics, internal dynamics. I don't want to say that society is always easy. It's not. But I don't want to say that there aren't difficult situations in our life and others, or that everybody has a perfect behavior and it's just us who suffer for nothing. But it's very clear that we project on external world our own dynamics, our own traumas, our conflicts, etc. And allowing yourself to be happy, to say, okay, I will confront this. And everything's okay. Even if it's not okay, it's okay. Everything okay doesn't exist. What I've seen is, as soon as one problem's solved, there's another one, not for me. And also for people, the most amazing people I've met, not just for me. When we see others, everything's normal, no? People look normal from a distance. I don't know. Anyway, the concept of normality, well, let's leave that aside for the moment. But from a distance, oh, that person, everything's fine with him. But all you need to do is to know them to get a bit nearer. And that's the same for everyone. A while ago, I was talking to somebody who told me the story that was going near in the master of Lama Ganchen in his life. There were stories going around, the conflicts and problems that he wasn't directly involved because he was extremely stable and joyous. He was really well. But around him, there were incredible problems that needed to be that he had to confront. So problems exist, and they will always be there. But let's try not to attach ourselves to identity of suffering. I don't know if that's clear, is it? So allow me to be happy. Allow yourself to be happy. That means a lot. And abandon any feelings of hostility and of unhappiness, sadness. Don't be attached to suffering, to sadness, and to rancor. Let it go, let it go. If we need a metaphor, what's the best behavior when you put something in your mouth that has a horrible taste? What's the best behavior? What do we do? Or you spit it out. Either you spit it out or you swallow it. That's it, pasta. That's it. When we live a situation that we don't like, what do we do? Or you digest it, or you spit it out. But one thing that you shouldn't do is to continue to repeat, but this shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't be like this. But how come that happened? And can go on and on and on, repeating, and to continually immerse ourselves in it. Sometimes what happens is that we have a pain inside of us, and to justify that pain and to have some kind of consistency, we try to find a world which is ugly around us, and the reason for which we feel that way. But sometimes what happens is at a certain point, the pain has gone, but we're still attached to that pain, and we still feel that pain. I don't know if you remember the example that I used to make about the soup. I'm going to repeat it. Once I was in Holland, and for some reason, I don't know why, I generated an idea that I hated soup. Even less at lunch, even more so at lunch. If it was in the evening when it's cold, okay, maybe okay. But soup at lunchtime, no. It was an anathema for me. In Holland, what do they eat? Soup and sandwiches, basically. This is my experience. And we were at a congress, and it was lunchtime, and of course there was soup. Somebody comes and offers me a bit of soup. I said, what could I do? I said, okay, better than being hungry. I start eating the soup. I finish a whole bowl of soup. And the person said, would you like another bowl? And before, somebody asked me, how's lunch? And I said, well, what do you expect? Soup for lunch. And then they offered me soup. And my direct experience was that the soup was actually good. It had the right texture, the right temperature. It was really nice. And my impulse when they asked me if I wanted more, was to say yes. But what was my reply? No, because I do not like soup, even if I was enjoying it at the time. Very often, it's stronger, the attachment to our identity, than our direct experience. We identify ourselves with certain dynamics and attitudes, and even that thing isn't there anymore, we're still attached to that. And that happens with suffering, with sadness, with loneliness. We're attached to this. Therefore, we need to let it go. Oh. It happened, yes, but it's gone. Let's look ahead. What do we want to create? Where do we want to go? Let's enjoy what we have now. Let's just say the truth, tell truth. Most of us, we have everything we need to be happy. The only thing missing is our own satisfaction and allowing ourselves to be happy. But from the point of view of the context, we find ourselves in materially and what's around us. What's lacking? There's most of the time there's absolutely nothing which is lacking. But I'm sure each one of us would, hey, yeah, but hang on, you don't know my life. We would all say, if I give the list of things that don't work, I'm sure we could all make a long list of things that we... But probably none of these things are essential. In the base, we all have something. We basically, we all have what we need to be happy, but what is lacking is allowing ourselves to be happy, to let ourselves go of our dynamics, our habits, and above all, and identities of ourselves that we formed. Therefore, abandon hostility and don't be attached to conflict and to sadness. Sometimes letting go of sadness is like almost like betraying yourself. Is that clear? You're on everything I've gone through. How can I possibly be happy? How can I be happy given what happened to me? All this happened to me. How can I possibly be happy? But it's a gift we give ourselves to allow ourselves to be happy. The concept of abandoning sadness, and the first time I read it was here, because it's as if the sadness is not the consequence of a context, but an inner state that we develop, that we can get rid of. Just let it go. Obviously. Let's try to not to remain attached to this identity, even though it's easier. Let's allow ourselves to let go and to thank, to rejoice for things that we have in the present moment. Not the things that rather, to connect ourselves with this inner state of satisfaction and peace, which is inside of us and which is possible. Therefore, a spiritual practitioner, one of the signs of his level of attainment is the quantity of joy that he or she has. The more elevated spiritually a person is, the more balanced they are, the fewer conflicts they have, and the more happy they are. One of the signs of internal conflict is sadness, rancor, etc. Everybody I've known who've been an example to me of who I would like to be are all people who are joyous, who don't have guilt or inner sadness. For example, the abbot Atisha in Tibet, but okay, in India also. He was one of the masters of Lama Michel, who had such a level of lightness and joy. Anything that happened, he managed to maintain his sense of joy, whatever happened around him. Albagnano Rinpoche was like that. Therefore, we should take this example, even though it doesn't come naturally, but connect ourselves with joy, with rejoicing. Abandon any aversion and sadness. I don't know why here it's translated as ill will. And be joyful wherever you go. Avoid being attached to anything at all. Attachment when we grasp and we don't want to let go of it. That's attachment. What's the probability that we have, that we obtain something and we never separate ourselves from that object? What's the probability of that being possible? 50%? If they're external things, 0. Internal, 100%. But if I reach an internal state of joy, can I keep it? Are there inner qualities that when we develop, if we're attached to them, can we keep hold of them? But people, situations, material wealth, and all other things which are outside of us, including our body, for however much we like them and how lovely they are and how much we want to keep them, sooner or later we have to separate ourselves from them. Therefore, we need to enjoy what there is as much as possible with the knowledge that the nature of impermanence. I like it, it's nice, I'm going to enjoy it. It's finished. Okay, great that it existed. And not that while I drink it and I live it, taking it for granted without not enjoying it, and then when it's finished I'm upset that it's finished, which happens sometimes, whether the other person, we don't, when the person is alive, we don't consider them, we don't give them importance, we don't esteem, they're not part of our lives, and time passes, and when the person dies, we're upset because they're not there anymore. The important things, while the person is there, give the best to enjoy as much as possible, and when it's not there, to be grateful that this person existed. Every time I think of Lama Michel Rinpoche and other masters that I've had, but mainly him, the sentiment I have is of joy. Somebody asked, well, Lama, are you sad? Are you feeling? I said, actually, no. It would be nice if he was here with us. But there's no question of that. Not even worth considering. But when I think about him, what's the sensation that comes to me? Joy. And joy of everything I lived with him and I received, and I can continue to receive from him what he is. The gratitude. In order to have gratitude, we need to first of all live it in the best way to maximum, and accept that impermanence is part of our nature. Everything that starts is already starting to finish. We have this idea that we want something forever, and they lived for happily ever after. Forever doesn't exist. As I said the other time, when somebody asked me, Lama, I can't live like this forever. Don't worry, like this doesn't exist. Either it'll deteriorate or it'll get better. Therefore, don't be attached, grasping something without being able to, how can I say, with this expectation, the illusion that it will stay in that way. Things come and go. They transform continually. The important thing is to live them well, because that interaction in the current moment is to create a positive interdependence so that we transform in a positive way. Because if we're together now, soon it'll finish. The important thing is that it lasts forever, but the important thing is that it helps us to transform in a positive way, that it helps us a positive interdependence in our life. Therefore, let's avoid attachment to objects, to people, to situations. An attachment, the strongest one which we have, is the attachment to reality as we believe it should be. We do something, we expect things to go in a certain way. We want that things be in a certain way. But they don't happen in that way. Things are different. Therefore, don't grasp to idealized vision of things will be. It doesn't mean doesn't mean you have to separate from everything. So it doesn't mean you have to be detached. It simply means that a lack of attachment is that you live it fully while it's there, but once it's gone, you're not sad because it's no longer there. If you have a strong attachment, you're happy, you're fearful while it's there that it's going to end. And it's even worse when it's finishing, so you don't even enjoy it while it's there. Is that clear? Because in our way of saying things, we often the concept of living without attachment means having nothing, no possessions whatsoever. No. We need to enjoy what we have as much as possible. Friendships, people who are near us, pleasures we have. We need to enjoy them as much as possible with the knowledge that soon they'll finish. When they finish, we just say how nice that they existed. Otherwise, at the beginning of September, what happened? I was talking with Will. How are you? I was much better during the holidays. What do you expect? The holidays have just finished. Well, I hope it's a bit better later. With the works and everything in the temple, when I talk to I try to get in touch with the people who work on the temple, the suppliers, the engineers. How are you? How's the things? And what I see is that, and it's a classic reply in this time of year, it's better on holiday, and which I've lived many times, that you go on holiday. It seems absurd to me. Let's say the holiday lasts 7 days. The first day was still connected to things that we left behind. When the third day, the fourth day, the person starts relaxing, and the fifth day, the tragedy begins. Everything's about to finish. Oh, but a few days. Oh, it was so nice, but I should have more. Oh, it's nice, but yeah. But soon I'll be there, so the person isn't even present in the holidays. And I've never understood this. If you like, enjoy it until the end. What I see very often, this is born from a great attachment to the non-acceptance of impermanence. The attachment, we want the thing to stay with us. The non-attachment is the acceptance that it's not being submissive, but it means being consistent with nature, and which is inherently impermanent. So I accept. I have no attachment in that I'm in harmony with nature of things. When things transform and it's no longer that what it was, what does that leave me? How nice that I had it. I don't know how many times I've said the same thing. Therefore, to avoid attachment to everything and be free from avidity and desire. And you remain free from craving and desire. Abandon the attachment to everything and remain free from craving and desire. Actually, it's not. It's more craving. attachment, actually. It means not craving and desire. So it doesn't. In Tibetan, it's attachment. So from Tibetan, literally, it means abandon attachment, whatever, to everything, and remain free from attachment. Means learn to go with the flow of life, to adapt yourself to circumstances, and to live with, in harmony, the continual transformation of everything that we live. Okay? I think that's quite clear. One of the things that I like very much about this text, whatever, you could spend a whole life studying, because it's not a text. If you haven't the previous verse or the next one, you can look at any of the verses. You could point to any of the verses, and they all act as a guideline for our life. Well, let's finish. We'll just wrap up now. We have our habits, our own daily routines, which is fine. But we must be careful to not fall into our usual habits of just surviving, living as a kind of reaction to what's happening. What I invite you to do is to take and to read these words, if not everything, at least some, that which is most relevant to you in this precise moment. This is part of the teachings of Lojong, which we'll see the 5 points of mind training, Lojong. There's a point which talks about this, which means start from your weakest point. So let's start from the most important thing that we need to cultivate. And let's take that and we remind ourselves, we'll memorize it. We'll memorize the verse. We write it on the telephone. We put it on the mirror. We read it several times a day. We try to maintain awareness in that direction. Because that is training. Training means do something which is not easy but should be repeated. Therefore, I ask you, I invite you to, if you think that this has been of benefit, remind yourself, write yourself messages, write post-its, put it all over the place, in any way, but try to think before you think, which means before you to have a determining thought, it's this way or that way, do this, that. You reflect 2 or 3 times. Go over the teachings of a teacher. What I'm thinking now, is it coherent with, is it consistent with us? Is it beneficial to me or others? No. Okay, so let that go. If we, are there lots of thoughts, or do we remain attached to one thought? So a thought comes. So if it's not the thought you want, if you wait a bit, you get another one. Then there's another thought. So instead of attached to certain thoughts, just let it go, because don't worry, there'll be another thought, and then another thought after that. And I ask you with my heart, from the depths of my heart, please don't victimize yourself. Rinpoche reminded us always, verse of Buddha, I'm my own protector, I'm my own enemy. Let's take the reins of our life in our own hands. We allow ourselves to be happy. We give priority to our life, from the inside to the outside, looking, without looking at others, looking at ourselves without judging others. This text makes a very important point. It serves, it's useful to observe our own behavior, not that of others. The point is not to say, oh, look what Atisha says, you've got attachment. No, we should be looking at our own behavior. I'm very happy to transmit these teachings because Atisha had a fantastic characteristic. And in Lojong in general, Atisha, I've got a particular attachment to Atisha, this capacity to keep our feet on the ground, to go back to the most simple things. And in front of that, look at ourselves in the eye. What am I doing? Where am I going? Once somebody went to Atisha and said, Atisha, I want to practice Dhamma. What do you think if I make many offers? And he said, it's better to practice Dhamma. What do you think if I do many circumambulations of the stupa, better to practice Dhamma? What do you think if I do many mantras? It's better to practice Dhamma. And he said, what do I need? And Atisha said, you need faith and direction. And not to be frightened, to look yourself in the eyes and see your own defilements. Trijang Rinpoche a few years ago, it was a private conversation I had with him. I said to people, if you do a particular practice, whatever it might be, if years after you've been doing this practice that you have few patience, more stability, less anger, more joy, it's great. It means it's working. On the other hand, if it doesn't have a good effect on you, change the practice. It means it doesn't mean it means it's not the right thing for you. The point is to have the force to look at a self in the eye. I want to be this kind of person, and that's a priority for me. And this means, first thing, it means that you don't victimize yourself anymore. I'm not here, well, I'm like this because this, that, and the other happened to me. No. In this situation, what can I do? What's the best course of action? And there we gradually transform and give direction. As we said before, we accept, embrace ourselves and redirect ourselves, not with a feeling of guilt or punishment. Therefore, I invite you to read and reread, to memorize, write, to bring this into your daily life. The last text, whomever got this, who's got this booklet, I advise you not to read the last chapter. Okay, unless you have a certain level. It's a joke, but it's also a bit true. You really need to have a bit of stability before you read it. Now, of course, now that I've said that, everybody's going to read the last chapter. That was not my intention. I just realized as I was saying it that it was counter-effective. I advise you to read the 8 verses of and 8 points of mind training in the next weekends when we have time. Towards the end of the year, I want to continue with the jeweled garland of Bodhisattva, and I want the 8 points of mental training, and then 7 points of mental training, and then who knows, maybe also the medicine to vomit the inner tumor. Who knows? The medicine to vomit the inner tumor. We can read together, you and me. I want to thank you, each of you, for being here, not only for being here, but also because I see sincerity in what you're doing. Nobody said because you have to be here, or because it's something in society where we find stuff is important or it creates a good image. It's not because culturally we have to go to the temple. We're here because we're trying to find something which is good for us and others. And there's a certain sincerity in this, and in our hearts, but also intellectually. And this is important. As we say, I thank you for being here with an open heart and a clear mind. I don't think I've taught you anything. Simply, we've seen things together of things that most of us know already. They're the simplest things that we need to review again and again because they're actually the most important things. Therefore, I thank you for giving me the opportunity. It really gives me pleasure. And I brought this book because the Book of Kadam, for whoever reads English well and who would like to, there are conversations. The first part of the book, the first 23 chapters of this book, we talk about this. It's the text, the Gallant Bodhisattva. If somebody wants to go further, it's not so easy, but it's a kind of old language translated with a slightly old-fashioned English, but it's still very nice. And this is, and we'll see each other soon. Let's make our dedications, and we'll recite the quick return for Lama Ganchen. Let's make our dedications that each of us can put into practice the teachings in the best way possible. We'll look at the prayer written by Trichan Rinpoche. If you have this book, we're on page 20. delek, itzen takte delek, concho. At dawn at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Sem Chö Sutro, Chö Lam Tutro, Lam La Parce, Yom Osho. May the mind become Dharma. May Dharma become the path. May the path be free from interferences. Dagilonga, Chula Chopadang, Chuming Samcho, Namba Shiwadan, Chaba Tumba, Tibalupa, Belahimbidu, Chati Sol. It's a translation, an improvised translation, says that would be. May my thoughts, or better, may there be auspiciousness that my thoughts be directed towards that which is virtuous in accordance with Dharma. May all my thoughts be and behavior in not consistent with Dharma, negative, may they be pacified. And may all the desires, the virtuous desires consistent with Dharma, be realized without obstructions. Tashidane? Thank you. Yeah.